and welcome to Soul Mastery for the soul-led entrepreneur who desires it all: purpose, power, and profits. I'm your host, Chaitali Desai, business and success mentor, utilizing the neuroscience of business to help entrepreneurs increase their impact and their income. And guys, today I have such a fun guest coming on. We are talking about archetypes in life, how you can apply them in business, and I cannot wait to dive in. So let's welcome Michele Parad, intuitive guide and business strategist, to the show. Welcome, Michele. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Chaitali. It's so great to be here.
Yeah, I'm so excited for today's topic. I love archetypes, as I was sharing with you before. But before we dive in, let's get to know you a bit. So share with our guests, our listeners, a little bit about you, what you do. What is your magic?
Yes. So I work with entrepreneurs and business founders to really go through what I want to call a rebirthing process.
Ooh, sexy.
So we take a look at what no longer serves them. Typically, there are certain elements of your business that just need to die, for lack of words. But there are certain things that we have attachments to, and we tend to hang on to them for dear life because there's something. There's a person and another person involved. There's potentially a lot of time and investment that you put into something, right? And
Yeah.
so sometimes we turn our blinders on to what is serving us and what's not serving us based on our own belief systems and our situations. And so I really take people through a process to understand where they're headed and expand their understanding of where they're headed to more than what they think they are capable of now. And then leaving behind, the elements, the people, the surroundings, the foundations that are no longer needed for them. And so we go through a process, typically 4 or 5 months, where we understand what the goals of the business are, and then go through different tools to enable them to understand, okay, what's the next stage of my core message? What's the next evolution of my strategy, marketing strategy? How am I going to show up in the world? So we go through, both the scientific approach as well as the intuitive and spiritual approach to, where someone is headed, and typically work with people who are pretty mission oriented as well. So,
Okay, that was a lot to take in. But what really stood out to me was the letting go. Look, that shit is hard because you have built a life, a business through certain habits, through certain practices. And it's so funny that this is the conversation today because it's something I'm talking about later at the time of this recording. And it is so wild. While you were talking, I was like having a conversation with my gods. I'm like, oh, you guys are funny. Because this is such an important topic. And I can't wait to see how you're going to tie this in with archetypes. But leaving things behind, people, places, ideas, habits, that is hard. And I think it's so hard for people. I mean, it's doable, obviously, don't get me wrong. But I think it's so hard for people because it's the devil they know.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are introducing this topic to your clients, like I can imagine there is tremendous pushback. So how are you introducing this concept that you have to let things go? You get to let things go to go to that next level.
Yes, sometimes my clients can get a little triggered.
Sometimes. I imagine it must be every damn time.
But the good thing is that we also work on the subconscious, and we do a little bit of the energy healing kind of comes into play. And so that really alleviates people's initial shock, when I tell them like this part, it's like their left arm, that's gotta go.
Yes. Oh my God, that's exactly. or like your leg, like you're cutting the legs off of them somehow, right?
Right.
So,
And so,
oh, go ahead.
yeah, so it's a process of letting go of certain fears, of even the letting go process, and slowly and surely getting them comfortable with the new that they're creating as opposed to the obsession over the old.
Yeah, and I think that must be such a dynamic conversation because so often, I just my personal experience and with clients is, again, it's because it's the devil you know. So even if it's like weighing you down, you're so used to it,
Mhm.
and you keep stepping back into it out of like that uncomfortable comfortability. Not
Mhm.
sure if that's really a great descriptor, but that's the one I'm going with.
Yeah.
And so shifting their mindset or their subconscious thoughts to, but look at what's over here, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
really starting to sexify that aspect of it. So, like, when you are introducing these topics, you were saying that there's like energetics that you're sharing behind it and nothing to do with your
Mhm.
proprietary techniques or anything. But like, how are you introducing this? Do your clients already understand like the energetic concepts behind it, or is it new to them? Like, where are they?
Mhm.
Like, for someone who's listening right now to us.
Um, Certainly, I typically work with people who are somewhat into personal development or meditation. There's a base level of interest in spirituality and healing. So, for the most part, there's a base level of understanding. But the people I work with really vary. Some are themselves, human design and astrology experts. They know even more than I do, which I've really understood the gamut of what's out there. And so, um, so their knowledge really can vary. It's more of their desire to step into a greater version, and they are now realizing themselves that there's something potentially wrong with what they're doing. Either it's that they may actually be successful, but they're not enjoying what they're doing anymore.
Oh, yeah.
So they're bringing in money, but it's not fulfilling them.
Satisfying.
Something off about it. Or on the other spectrum, they are doing something that they love, but they're not bringing in the money. And so, so those are two different, I would say, avatars that have their own interesting, attachment styles. And we take a look at really what's deeply going on and why someone, for example, is in a place where they are pursuing their purpose, and but the money isn't flowing. So sometimes subconsciously we are keeping ourselves in a space because we could be relying, for example, on other sources of income. Let's say, you're relying on your husband, or you're relying on some kind of pension or some, grant or whatever it is, and it's a comfortable source of income that's kind of keeping you in that zone. So you're continuing um, to go in that cycle. So that's just one example that kind of comes to mind, but it's super, super individual depending on the person.
Yeah.
So we look at what's really deeply happening, because maybe they have, and I'm sure you talk to a lot of women, but let's say they have, there's a woman entrepreneur, and she has generations and generations of women being supported by men and being codependent on men. And so what she doesn't understand is that programming is happening in the background for her. And so if that's the program, she'll always feel like, okay, I either need to depend on my husband, my boss, like some man figure in their life to earn money. but they're not aware that that's happening. It's just somewhere in the background. And then they're like, why can't I just make my own money?
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to go out as an entrepreneur and have that running. And so it's like each individual has their own, ancestry and lineage. And it's interesting to understand not just your current situation, but your grandparents, where you came from. And then you can get really, meta and go into past life stuff. You can go into common consciousness as well.
Common consciousness.
Yeah, common consciousness could even be the thoughts of the collective today. So if you're in a city,
So when you're tapping into the
yeah,
bigger, okay.
Sometimes you can be super affected by the people that are around you or the city that you're in. So if your city is going through something, then the thoughts of all of them collectively can, especially if you're an empathetic person, can affect you as well. And so that's one type of common consciousness. And then there's the past life common consciousness, which is why a lot of people felt like they were, I don't know, Mary Magdalene in a past life, let's just say. Why is it that several people remember themselves as that? It's because we as a collective have common memories of history as well.
Yeah. I love epigenetics in all forms. And it's so true. And what's fascinating about it is now science is also catching up and saying it. We used to say 5 to 7 generations, but it's now as far back as 12 generations. So when you really think about where so many of us come from and the amount of pillage really has happened across the world, and then we wonder, like, why you have the scarcity that runs through everything you do. And I think it kind of speaks to what you're saying, especially when it comes to like the money mindset or the programming around it. It's that sense of scarcity or that sense of lack that in some generation, maybe multiple generations, we felt.
Yeah.
So then when they come to you and you start to pick up on this, Michele, how are you connecting this to archetypes, and what archetypes do you actually work with?
Yeah, so I have a quiz that is specifically around the brilliance archetypes, because there's lots of different archetypes out there.
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard of them, and so I didn't necessarily invent them, but the ones that I have are very specifically, they have a different framework and purpose, and they're more about identifying someone's gift and role and way of operating in the world.
Cool.
And
We'll
so,
be dropping that in the show notes too. So I'm excited for my listeners to be able to take that and just step into their brilliance.
yes. And so it helps people to identify who they truly are, because sometimes people can get confused. A lot of times they take on an identity that's not truly theirs, based on what other people have told them that they're good at, based on their experiences. So sometimes they end up in a role that they're not really meant to be in, but there's not no meant to be in. It's just, it's slightly out of alignment. And
yeah, that so speaks to human design and like really coming back to your innate programming, really like who you were actually designed to be. And so I think I love how you put it, because it's something that I share often, but it's cool to see from different, or to hear from different perspectives how it shows up for people.
yes. So so there's 12 of them, and I won't go through all of them, but essentially when you find out what your archetype is, it's really helpful to then imagine how you could be that in your day-to-day life. Like, how would this archetype act? For example, I'm a magician, and of course
I'm the visionary.
of course, we have all the different archetypes within us too. So, there's an element that we have of everything, but this is the one that is showing up the most profoundly for me at this stage in time. And so it's like, okay, now that I take this archetype, how would a magician act in the world? What content can I create that makes people feel that I'm a magician?
Yeah.
What day-to-day action can I take that allows me to, it's like abracadabra and then like poof, like something comes into reality.
Yeah, 100%.
That was, for me a long time when I started on the entrepreneurial journey. I completely forgot that I have this gift within me. I had many glimpses of it because there was just so many situations where, it was like supposedly something was going wrong within my workplace and I magically made it right. It was like at the last minute, there was an event, for example, that didn't get filled and nobody was coming. And then I found a channel partner that brought like 200 people to the event. And so it's just, these random things that are super magical. And I forgot that I had that innate ability. And so, I spent a lot of time just working, and burning out ultimately and doing many different things that were not aligned, right? So it was like this remembering you have to consistently remember, okay, like who are you? How can I step into that persona every single day? How can I imagine myself as that archetype?
So is that your ritual that you start your day with, or is this just something that you're just saying as a practical example?
I do turn it into a ritual, and I think it's dependent on the person, how they want to go about it and what their archetype is. So, if you're a restorer archetype, for example, then maybe your ritual is just going out and spending some time with the earth, maybe even toiling with the soil and gardening, even if that's not really what you're meant to be doing as a job necessarily, but that's going to give you the life force, the energy to then do other things that are super restorative, or to do a job also that is of that nature as well. So
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say you're talking about a different archetype. Just quickly, what are the 12 archetypes that you work with, or that you, I guess, work with?
Yes, let me pull them up. But it's so magician, healer. There is the rebel. There's the warrior. There is the restorer. I said educator. There is the unicorn.
Oh,
Which is, the unicorn is one that doesn't fit into any one. It's kind of also like a chameleon, but it kind of jumps from different archetypes. There's the networker, the innovator, builder. Oh yeah, builder and explorer.
oh, those sound very interesting. And so when someone takes your quiz, do they get unfortunately I didn't take your quiz yet, but so when they do take it, do you like explain what it means and like give practical ideas of how to step into it, or like how to put on that identity?
Yeah, so far I have given a shadow aspect and then the positive gift side of it. So
Yeah.
there's definitely some advice about how to utilize it, and then there is a little bit of a guide that goes into more advice, and it goes into a little bit of the brand archetype, the branding, the mission, the lifestyle, and then maybe even a business example to just to start thinking about it as an
Oh,
inspiration. So
that's excellent. So guys, definitely take this quiz because it's really fun to understand your quote unquote role and how you can operate and have fun with it. And it'll definitely be in the show notes. So you said innovator. So innovator is another definition or another word for visionary. And really stepping into it, it's almost like you get this, again, another permission slip to really fulfill your purpose. Even if though, because here's where I think, and I'm sure you can speak to this, Michelle, logically, it makes no sense. But there's something internal that's like, oh yeah, like you get to pull on that thread, right?
Right, absolutely. And so, it goes back to what we were seeing in terms of how do we create the new version of you as opposed to the old persona that you had maybe created for yourself. So again, this helps you step into envisioning what would it be like to be a higher version of yourself. That's really what I would say an archetype is. And even, I don't know if you've read the alter ego effect,
No.
but so they reference the Superman. And so they're like, okay, is the alter ego the Superman or is it Clark Kent? And so apparently the alter ego is Clark Kent, and you're actually the Superman all along. So it's like the lie is that we've created some version of ourselves that isn't really the truth. But underneath that, it's like an excavation. It's like of all the dirt, and then underneath is this brilliant diamond, right? So
Right.
underneath all of the stuff that we sort of created it within this lifetime is that beautiful archetype underneath it all.
I love that explanation,
Uh,
especially like sharing, like, well, from the book that that Superman is actually who you are, well, assuming that that's your archetype. But
right.
that's so empowering,
I think so. Yes.
right? And then you get to say, okay, if Superman is really who I am, what am I going to do with that power today? That's
Yeah.
freaking brilliant. I love that explanation. Thank you for sharing it. If people are listening and they're like, oh, I need to know more, how are we finding you? Are you on social? Like, I know we're going to share your quiz below, but how, like, on social, if they want to get like quick tips and all of that?
Yes. So you can find me on my website. I have a treasure trove of gifts on there as well. So micheleparad.com is where you can find me. And then Instagram, michelle.parad. So those are the main places I'm currently hanging out. And
I love it. So I have a quick question before we wrap up today, especially knowing that you're the magician. What brings you joy?
Ooh. Uh, I love I love manifesting. I know that doesn't sound like an actual. It's kind of like a hobby, but uh, I uh, I love like thinking up different spiritual ways of being. I'm like, oh, what would it be like to combine breath work and coaching or something like along those lines? Like lately, I basically went to a breath work retreat that was combining breath work and bioenergetics with dance and trance dance. And it all came from a figment of my mind where I was like, oh, like, what would it be like if I combine these different modalities, right? And then suddenly, something comes up in my sphere where it's an opportunity to go and experience that. So I really like imagining all the things that could be and see like how it comes into my space and into my realm. So that pretty much kind of explains the magician in me as well. So
And you seem to have mastered or at least excelled at surrender.
mm, that is something I definitely outline more of in my book. Well, it's a multi-author book, Success with Source, but that was a main thing that I had to learn along the way, because I'm a Virgo, double Virgo.
Oh,
It's a very analytical, very controlling sometimes, I want to say, likes to plan things out, right? And
yeah.
so for this type of person, surrender was something I really, really had to learn. Didn't come innately to me.
But I
But yeah.
don't think it comes innately to many of us. But to tap into joy, surrender is like a bridge. So I guess it's a follow-up question. What's your greatest piece of advice to someone who's like, oh, surrender, letting go? How would I even start that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I really do love the analogy with what I'm starting to do, which has really, really surprised me, and is an element of surrender, which is this trance dance stuff. And so it's a feeling of just allowing the dance to dance you. It's like you're not the one who is you're not reining it in. You're not like back to the in control, but you're not mapping out the steps. You're just allowing for it to come through, and somehow that sensation is so beautiful and so freeing, because you know that you're being guided, you know that you're being taken care of and safe, and it's like everything can be put into its natural form and natural state, if we're willing to allow for that. That's the main thing, because if we're halfway allowing and halfway not, or it's going to be this back and forth sensation. But that's part of the learning part of it. Sometimes we can be like, okay, I'm just going to let things unveil as they should. And then we go back into fear, and then we do things we're not really supposed to. And then we go back into that state. So, that is part of being here on this earth. I don't think we can be, to be honest, fully surrendered beings. I mean, maybe you can challenge me on that, unless you're really at a high level of enlightenment. But I think most of us are going to, kind of teeter between the two realms. And it's always like when you step into fear, and when you step into a space where your body is contracting, it's always a good space to then remind ourselves, okay, how can we then get into that more flowy state? How can we move out of this stuckness? And each of us has our own tools for that. I don't recommend one specific thing for everyone, because each of us unveils our own approach, and I think that's really, really the beauty of it. So I know that there's lots of schools of thoughts that are like, this is like, follow us and do this way, right? I think for each of us, it really, really depends. And it's important to explore what is the most magnificent for us. And that can also change over time. Like the rituals that I had when I first started out is not the ones that I have today. And that's fun for me. I think for other people, maybe they want that consistency. So again, there's many different tools to get into the state of flow, get into the state of surrender. For me, it's a combination of breath work and chanting, and this trance dance, which is coming through. But it used to be, just pure meditation. It's just pure emptying my thoughts and then connecting with the different elements as well, earth, water, air, fire, because that's what we are all. Those are elements that build us. We are built of, and it's important to balance those out as well. Yeah.
It's beautiful because it very much is like the ebb and flow of the ocean. Because as much as we want like a hard and fast rule, do this and you get that, it's counterintuitive to surrender. It's the exact opposite, actually.
Right.
You get to step into it. And I like to turn everything into a game because I can get my thinking mind off of it and just have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I feel like, okay, how am I going to play with this? Because, I'm a double Scorpio. We don't give up control so easily. And
Yes.
that's not our style. But then at the same time, the more you try to control it, the more you constrict it, and the less
Mhm.
opportunity there is for it to become whatever the desire is. So I
Mhm.
think it's beautiful that you're also talking about the dance. Michele, thank you so much for today's conversation. To our listeners, thank you for listening. Definitely take Michelle's quiz because I think you're going to be fascinated when you figure out or when you learn what your dominant archetype is. Granted, you'll have elements of all of them working in you, but there's one that's taking the lead. And to step into that and to open up to the possibility of it, I think is absolutely beautiful. So, Michele, thank you again for being with us. And until next time, I am Jaitali Desai, and this is Soul Mastery. I'm wishing you a beautiful day. And remember, you are the CEO of your business and life. The best way to step into that is to decide and allow the possibilities to come through. Thank you